Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ignorant Intellectual on Media. Today, I thought we'd do our next episode in my CD library. This will be episode 9, I think, and we'll do another 20. All right, we opened our first box because I took all my CDs off my shelves to make room for my Blu-rays and DVDs, my movie library, basically, and I put them in boxes. Now I'm pulling them out um, and going through them all for your interest and my interest and have some fun, right? So we've done 8 and we're still in the same big first box, but we started at the C's because when you put your CDs in, if you started the bottom would be the A's, and then as you place more and more off your shelf onto the into the box, then it would go up to the B's and the C's, right? So we're finally reaching the A's. We've got a bit of B's left and some A's in this selection of 20 CDs. All right, so let's go through it. I don't think it'll take very long. All right, so first up is a CD called Star Power, Becker and Fagan. All right, so this is basically 12 tracks by the two members of Steely Dan before they were Steely Dan. Now there's a number of compilations of their pre-Steely Dan stuff that's been out. This is the one that I found of it, and it has 12 of their early songs, so early Steely Dan before they were named Steely Dan. So it's not bad. It's the sound quality isn't all that great. They're all demos mostly. So, but overall, it's not bad. Came out 2001. All right, and has songs like let's see, Come On, Come Back Baby, Soul Ram, Let George Do It. Do you recognize any of these songs? I didn't until I picked up the CD. So that's the first CD. If you're not a if you're if you're not a fan of Steely Dan, and I'm not sure why anybody wouldn't be, because well, they are kind of like a grow on you type of band because they kind of mix uh, jazz with rock. It's kind of rock oriented with a jazz influence. And the songwriting is extremely good, and the voices are very good. But they're professional musicians. They really know how to play their instruments, right? So, and it's not fast or anything. It's not heavy. It's kind of like mellow kind of rock. So check out like Aja is one that's really good. Can't Buy a Thrill is another that's really good by them. I'll just put them up there as I talk, right? So, and after they separated, now Becker's dead. I think he died in 2017, 2018, somewhere around there. I think it was of cancer, but don't quote me on that. I'll leave it down here. And but I think Fagan's still alive. Now he put out a really great solo album. Becker's I'm not I didn't I after Steely Dan I didn't really get into Becker's stuff, but I did pick up a couple of Fagan uh, albums, and one of them is called The Nightfly. And if you like Steely Dan, you'll really like Donald Fagen's The Nightfly. So pick that one up as well, right? So anyway, so that's Steely Dan or Becker and Fagan. All right, next up is Wildflowers Under the Sofa by a group, well, a duo of Italian musicians, right? Their name are Gianluca Baccuzzi and Fabio Orsi. All right, and this is called Wildflowers Under the Sofa, and it's kind of a mellow CD. I haven't really delved into it, and I don't know much about them. I don't even know when this came out, but basically, it's a mellow, relaxing type of experimental album. Maybe you guys have listened to it. If you have, give me an opinion. Should I listen to this CD? It was picked up a few a few videos episodes earlier. I mentioned that there was a lady that was selling her CD collection of like got to been 500, maybe even more CDs, and I bought it for $50. This is one of those that was in that CD collection. So I transferred everything over to flash drives, and I'm listening to it in my car. And as I slowly go through it all, um, I'll end up coming across this album at some point, and I'll listen to it then. But here's a little, just an aside, a quick aside. All right, is what I've noticed since I've been listening to MP3s, or the quality is a bit less than CDs quality, right? Like if you were to, my car doesn't play FLAC files, so like a true transfer of the same quality of 650 megabytes around that for like 10 to 15 songs on a CD. You can fit like 650 megabytes on it. That's full sound quality for it, right? When you transfer, you're transferring at around the highest MP3 is usually 320, and FLAC is what 1400. I'll put it here again. I think it's 1400, right? Um, anyway, so the sound on the CD is a bit better, but you sacrifice a bit of the sound because even if you have, I mean, the quality of your stereo system inside your car, like from the manufacturer, isn't going to be great unless you have a high-end vehicle, right? So even if you do reduce it down to a 320 from a 1411, I think it's 1411. Um, uh, you're going to hear a little bit difference. It usually just means you're going to have to turn the volume knob up some, right? But you can still hear all the instruments and everything. But what I'm talking about is the convenience outweighs the sound, right? Otherwise, everybody would be into going into all the different custom car places and having like these high-end stereos put in the car. Some people still do it, but it was huge in the 70s and 80s. People would do that a lot, right? Um, but anyway, so which is kind of funny because cars last a whole lot longer now than they did then, right? So you were buying like a $5,000 stereo system inside your vehicle, and then your car lasts 4 or 5 years, right? So, anyways, but I guess you could just pull it out and put it into your next vehicle, right? Anyway, so but after 4 or 5 years, the technology that's in your vehicle might be passé anyways, and you'd have to upgrade anyways, right? So anyway, so I'm digressing really badly here. The point I was trying to make is that when it becomes convenient, because if you get a 32 gig flash drive and you use it in your car in the USB slot, you can play, I don't know, like one album is 130 gigabytes, 150 gigabytes usually, right? At 320 kpc or whatever, right? Kps, sorry. Um, so 10 makes what? Megabyte, a gigabyte. You got 32, so 10, 320. So let's say 300 albums you can fit on one 32 gig flash drive. Um, and so you're going through them, and you're going through hundreds of albums on one flash drive, and you just click play, and usually most cars are good on when you turn off the vehicle, it goes back to where you left off on the USB stick, right? Um, so then you just continue on and you play through the whole 300 albums, right? But if all of this stuff is new to you or new music to you, um, you're going to listen to it, and then you're going to forget it, right? And until you listen to it, like, okay, there's this in marketing, okay, in marketing there's a thing when it comes to billboards, all right. The billboards, you shouldn't have any more than like 8 words on a billboard around there, because a person won't be able to read it and therefore not remember it. And they say a person won't embed a commercial or a billboard or anything until they've seen it like 7 to 8 times, and then they'll remember it, right? So I think it's the same thing with music. If you don't listen to an album more than like 8 or 10 times, you're not going to remember that album. And that's the thing with making things really convenient is, um, and I'm all for convenience. Like, I mean, I have an LP library. I have records, but I rarely listen to them. Only when I get in a nostalgic feeling will I pull out my record player and start playing records, or I want to listen to a certain album that I can't really find on CD. You can only get it on LP, then I'll listen to that. But I can transfer those albums, and I have, into an MP3 file, because you can do it with, with the record player that I have. You could transfer them into MP3 files, right, and put them on a flash drive directly from the unit, right? Um, so if I really want to listen to an album, I can, even if it's on a record, put it onto a USB and listen to it in my car, right? It's just a bit of work to do it, right? Anyway, so um, but doing it doing it with transferring them with CD is very easy with like the MP3, you know, Windows media player or whatever, right? So it's very easy. It takes like 2 minutes or whatever to transfer an album into an MP3 file and put it onto a flash drive, right? But so you have hundreds of albums on a flash drive and you're listening to it in your car. Now, if you go back in time, you may be a young person not remember this, but back in time, you used to buy CDs, or even before that, um, cassettes and 8 tracks, and you would put them in your vehicle, and you may have 4 or 5 of them in your car because you're not going to have your whole library in your car because there's only so much room in your car. So what you do is usually pick 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe 10 or whatever. Maybe you have a case or whatever with your 8 tracks or your or cassette tapes or your CDs or whatever, and you have it in your trunk maybe, but you're only pulling 3 or 4 of them out to put on your front seat to listen to or whatever. So what happens is you you end up um, listening to certain albums or pretty much all your albums over and over and over again. You have it in your CD player or your cassette player and you play it. And when you're done playing it, you just play it again and then you play it again. And you basically, like the albums that I've listened to when I was in my teens, 20s, and all that time, during that time, I know them back and forth a lot more than, let's say, more recent music, unless I've listened to it like, at least 8 or 10 times. But what usually happens with me with new music is CDs are so cheap now, you can get them for like $1 each or less, right? Like I said, I bought like 500 of them for $50 off this woman. She had really good taste. It was all, you know, indie music, all alternative music, electronic music, off the beaten path type of music, not the mainstream, Rihanna or that kind of thing, right? And she was really into Canadian and American indie labels and indie rock, right? So um, stuff that you wouldn't hear on the radio or whatever, right? So but the problem is that because you have so much of it that you can consume now, and it's so easy to consume it, you don't remember half of it that you listen to. You may pick up on a song, or you hear that song again a few months later, and you go, I know I've heard that song from somewhere, but you don't recognize the name of the song, and you don't recognize the name of the band, or the group or the singer, unless it really super impresses you, and then you re-listen to that album, which happened a couple times on flash drives that I have listened to. I have repeated an album a few times when I've listened. Oh, that was really good. I'm gonna put that on again or whatever, right? But usually it's just going through the whole album, so you're not really concentrating on the music. It's more of background noise, so you don't remember a lot of it, right? Um, so even though I may have this on a flash drive, I may have listened to it already, and I just don't remember that I listened to it, right? And I don't recognize it because there's no conscious choice a lot of the time when listening to music because of the convenience. I think maybe that's what we're losing, and that's maybe part of the nostalgia of people going back and picking up records because with a record, it's hard to ignore a record because you have to physically play it, put it on the record player, and then within 20 minutes you need to flip the record. You have to go back to the record player, right? So you can't really get into other things for any long period of time without those other things being interrupted by you flipping the record or whatever, or changing the record, right? So basically, when you listen to a record, that's what you're probably going to be doing. You're going to be concentrating on listening to the music, right? So that's a thing that I think society today has maybe lost is people do that, I think, more with just songs now rather than with albums. I think they do it more with songs. So a person will remember a song and play it over and over again until they get sick of it and then move on to the next song. And they'll remember the songs and maybe the artist, but they won't remember any albums or anything like that anymore because people don't really, there isn't as much album oriented music or whatever anymore, right? So, um, but saying that, you can listen to a lot more music than you could before. I mean, I guess you could have a Walkman if you didn't have a vehicle, or you could store some music in your car to listen to. But basically, you're reduced to less than 10 usually albums that you would be listening to. And if you're in a Walkman with a cassette player or CD Walkman, then you probably have 2 or 3 of them on you at the most because it's not convenient to carry around like you know CDs or whatever in your pockets or whatever. You have to actually have like a man purse or something to carry them around with, right? Or a briefcase or something, right? So it's not convenient. So you may only be wandering around that day with one album, and that's the album that's actually in the player, right? So, and when you get sick of it, you put the radio on because usually they came with a radio as well. So the actual the actual you can actually carry your library around with you now. I mean, especially if you only have like 100 albums that you listen to or favorite albums that you like listening to, 100, 150, you put it on one flash drive, have it in your car, and listen to it whenever you want. If you're wandering around, um, you use your phone and you can put, you get a 32 gig, micro SD card or whatever, and you can put your whole library on that as well, and just wandering around with it on your phone or whatever, right? So, and you don't even need a USB drive anymore to put in your car. You can just do it through Bluetooth on your phone or whatever, right? If you want to do it that way. The issue with that is that you're going to fill up your phone with all your music, right? And then you won't have a lot of for anything else on your phone or whatever, right? So anyway, so I still use USB drives, but okay, so that was the digression. In that I I've listened to a hell of a lot more music now, or in the last decade or so, than I have when I was in my 20s and 30s and the 80s and 90s. Um, but I know the music of the 80s and 90s a lot better, and the 70s a lot better than I do, let's say, the 2000s or the 2010s or the 2020s, just because um, you were kind of forced to listen to albums over and over again, just because it was very inconvenient to try to carry around a large amount of music with you. Now it's not inconvenient at all, and you don't have to carry any. You can just stream Spotify or whatever, right? So, but I think people have lost the actual concentration on the music, where you know more about music, right? Anyways, that's just an opinion. All right. So next up is the last of the. I think it is the last of the Belle and Sebastian. I've done videos on the bees so far. I've done 8 of them, and Belle and Sebastian's come up in a few of the videos. And I still have more Belle and Sebastian. So this one is Dear Catastrophe Waitress, and this one is The Boy with the Arab Strap. All right. So I keep The Boy with the Arab Strap. Uh, um, an Arab strap is, I knew what an Arab strap is, and I was going to look it up again because I forget before I did this video. But you know what? Like when I bought the album, all right, when I bought Arab Strap, I have my laptop here. That's what, right? So when I bought this album, The Boy with the Arab Strap, I listened to it like 10 times or whatever. And I started going, what the hell is an Arab strap, right? So I looked it up, and now I forget what it is. I think it's a sexual item of some sort. An Arab Strap or a Scottish indie rock band? No, that's not what I want. All right. Uh, all right. Slang definition. There we go. What is an Arab strap? An Arab strap is a sexual device usually made of leather and a metal ring that is fastened or clinched around a human male's genitalia. All right. So that's what an Arab strap is. Okay. And do you think that is a racist thing to say? You know how sensitive everybody is these days about, you don't say Siamese twin anymore, right? Because the first recorded Siamese twins, or the most famous, were these conjoined twins in Siam, right? These two brothers, right? So, and there was so much press on them and everything, right, throughout their whole lives. So it became synonymous with conjoined twins. Siamese twins was, so everybody called them in when I was young, they called them Siamese twins. Now you don't call them Siamese twins because they're not, Siamese. They're not from Siam. They're conjoined twins. All right. So that's the proper term for it. That's what everybody uses now, because Siamese twins seems racist, right? All right. So an Arab strap, which is a slang term. So doesn't that kind of sound racist? I think maybe they need to change that name of that as well. I don't know. How about something like a Dutch oven? Is that racist against the Dutch? Um, do you know what a Dutch oven is? It's basically, you have your wife beside you in bed, and you do a fart into the covers, and then you pull the covers over your partner or whatever, and then they got to smell your fart. It's called a Dutch oven. I'm being gross, but anyway. So you know how you people name these things from, I don't know why it got termed the Dutch oven or whatever, or whether that's racist now and you can't use that term any. I mean, there's so many words that you can't use that I used to be able to use. Now you can't use them anymore, or you can use them. It just makes you sound, racist or bigoted or whatever, right? When it's just the language that you grew up on. You have no. The person who invented the term might have been a racist, or might have been a bigamist, or something like that. You understand? But the people that are using the term aren't. usually, right? It's just the term that they use. You know what I mean? People call craft dinner when, it's a name brand for like a macaroni and cheese or a Kleenex instead of a tissue or whatever, right? So, um, anyways, people are a bit sensitive on these things, I think. So this is the Boy with the Arab Strap is Belle and Sebastian's third album, and it came out in 1988. All right, and then later on, this is their sixth album. It's called Dear Catastrophe Waitress, and this came out in 2003. Both of these albums are extremely good, but Tiger Milk, again, I repeat myself, Tiger Milk is their best album. But these two albums are really, really good as well. I put Tiger Milk in my top 100, top 200 albums of all time, one of the greatest albums of all time. And these ones aren't far behind it. Any Belle and Sebastian album that you pick up um, isn't going to be bad. So this one, if you really like that saccharine type of sound that Belle and Sebastian are famous for, this one here, they hired what's his name from the Buggles? I wrote it down. Trevor Horn from the Buggles to produce this album, and this album is their most pop-oriented, sweetest type of album that you'll listen to. So if you really like Belle and Sebastian and wish they would even go more towards the pop, um, then this album might be one of the albums that you want to pick up, right? Dear Catastrophe Waitress. But all their stuff is extremely good. If you like, um, sweet sounding saccharine type of pop music with a gentleman with a a would you call it like a feminine type of voice? Like a George Michael or um, like a sweet type of voice, but Stuart Murdoch's writing. I think it's Stuart Murdoch. His writing is a lot more, let's say, sinister than than his voice is, right? So that was the attraction to me towards Belle and Sebastian is that he sings like he's this sweet guy walking in pink trees and that kind of thing, unicorns and stuff like that. But when you listen to his lyrics, they're like, mean sometimes or biting type of lyrics, right? So cynical type of lyrics. So the juxtaposition is quite attractive. Anyway, so all right, so that's Belle and Sebastian, their two albums. Now here's a girl called Annie, and this is called DJ Kicks. Now, DJ Kicks is the name of like 70 albums by different electronic artists. I think um, uh, it's like a series of albums by DJ Kicks, not DJ as in a person, but DJ Kicks. It's like a series of albums, and she made one of the albums. There was a bunch of like Thievery Corporation made a DJ Kicks album, right? Fortet made one. The Stereo MCs made another. I wrote a few of the albums, but there's 70 of them. And I like to get all of them because they're all really good. And now I've never heard of Annie. I've never listened to any of her electronic music, but she does house, neo disco, new disco, that kind of thing. So I'm probably going to really enjoy this album because I really like electronic music, all in all of its forms, right? So have you listened to Annie? I think she's British, if I remember correctly. Um, any of the DJ Kicks albums? Have you listened to any of those? Supposedly, a lot of them are good. All right, so um, I have it on an MP3 in MP3 somewhere in my car, so I'll eventually get to it. All right, so next up after that is Anthony and the Johnsons from 2000. It's their debut album. And it's basically what's her name? What was her name? I wrote it down. Um, Anaina. Anaina. Is that how you pronounce her? I think it's her. It's her group. I think they came out with a couple albums, but then she kind of went solo on her own. And this is basically, art pop, like chamber music, art pop, that kind of thing. Um, I have not listened to it. Have you listened to this? What do you think of this album? Let me know in the comments. It would be good to talk about some of this music that I have on CD, but I have not listened to, or maybe I have listened to, but there's 300 albums on a flash drive, and I'm going through all of them. It takes me like however many months to listen to all of them, and I'm just going through them. I'm not repeating them over and over again. I'm just moving on to the next 32 gig flash drive because I have so much music, right? So what do you think of Anthony and the Johnsons? All right. So next up after that is an album of B, B-side albums and rarities and stuff that you haven't heard on the regular albums of Anthrax. And if you haven't heard of Anthrax, they're one of the great, like thrash metal bands, heavy metal bands from the 1980s. There's like, when you speak about the 1980s, there's four bands that you really, really like. If you like heavy metal or hard rock type of, thrash metal type of music, you're going to listen to Slayer. You're going to listen to these guys. You're going to listen to Metallica, which is of the four, Metallica is my favorite. I think Master of Puppets is it's the greatest, like heavy metal album of all time, my opinion. And what's his name? His band that was with Metallica, Megadeth, and Megadeth. Countdown to Extinction is a really good album. All right, so but anyway, so this is Anthrax. This is Attack of the Killer Bees. So it's basically B sides of singles that they put out and some rare tracks that you haven't listened to. There's like 12 songs on this album, and actually for B sides, it's pretty fucking good actually. So have you listened to this album? When I bought this years ago, I paid $8.99 for it. All right, so and that isn't even one of their main albums. Like if you want to try Anthrax out, um, Among the Living, Among the Living, maybe pick up that one, give that one a try, see if you like them. But this is actually, to be honest, was the first Anthrax album I listened to, and then I listened to like their regular albums after that. And so this one kind of is kind of my favorite album, even though it's like B sides or whatever, right? It's my introduction. There is a thing about that, right? That let's say a director or a writer or a band or whatever, the first one that you listen to seems to be very impressionable, and it's the one that, even though others may consider another book or another movie or another to be the best one, you a lot of the times you're influenced because it was the first one. You think maybe that one is the best one, right? And when I listen to Anthrax, I listen to this album more than any other of their albums. So anyway, so that's Anthrax. Next up is Window Clicker, which is a single. All right, I don't really pick up singles. Um, when I picked this up, I didn't know Aphex Twin as good as I know them now, and I thought this was an album. I picked this up in a record store, a new record store, which there are hardly any left anymore. Um, in one of the main drags of my city, and it's not even there anymore. The whole building that it was in was teared down, and they built like a 30-story high condo, right? So, but anyways, it was a great place to pick up really good music because they had like the music that like the mainstream record stores didn't have. It was like like punk and like death metal and all this other type of shit that and a lot of electronic. They had an extremely large electronica, and I picked this one up. And this is basically Window Licker, one of Aphex Twin's greatest songs, and the B on it is Nanu or whatever. And anyway, so and then there's a song in between that you tell me what it says. All right. Anyway, so um, Aphex Twin, basically he has ambient works. His first album was called Ambient Works, 1985 to something. Anyways, I'll put it here or whatever. It's his best, all right. And ambient music, a style of slower electronic music, I really, really enjoy. And the older I get, the more I enjoy it, and the less I enjoy, like pop music or loud, fast music. It's funny because when you're young, you'll either listen to really slow, at least in my experience, you get attracted to stuff that's really slow, at least I did, and depressing, or stuff that's really fast, upbeat, really quick, really, really, gets your adrenaline running, right? And the stuff that's in between, like the I don't know, like the Elton Johns or the Billy Joels or those type of music, the Stevie Wonders, that kind of the in between stuff that isn't really slow and depressing or really fast and heart throbbing or whatever, right? You kind of ignore and don't think it's great, but as you get older, the more you kind of move into the middle and you like more mellow, slow, like soft rock or whatever, right? So, um, but I'm not that far gone that I don't listen to everything, right? So, but this is Aphex Twin Yeah, Selected Ambient Works, 1985 to 92, something like that, 1984 to 92. I can't remember the date of the years or whatever, but it's called Selected Ambient Works. That is an extremely good album. I would put that album in my top 100, top 200, or whatever, right? So, all right, so, but this one is his single Window Licker, and he superimposed his face, I think it's his face, onto a woman's body. I don't know. It looks kind of weird. All right. All right. So that's Aphex Twin. And now we'll get into the Angels of Light. I have two of their albums. Actually, this one is a split album with the Akron family. All right. Um, and this one is their third album. And it's called Everything Is Gone Here and Please Come Home. Kind of a slash in between. You look at it. So, it's a digipack. So I put it in a plastic bag. Right. So, and this one is as well. So I put it in a plastic bag. All right. So this one came out in 2003, and this split album came out in 2005. All right. I don't know much about the Angels of Light. All right. Because I haven't listened to them yet. Have you listened to the Angels of Light? Have you listened to this album? Let me know what you think in the comments. All right. And see if I'll like them when I listen to them. All right. Next up is one of the greatest guitarists of all time, very easily. All right. I have two more of his albums. I mentioned him in one of my mixed hauls because I found I think his first album. I think this one is his second. Uh, where did I put the sticker so I can remember this properly? Yeah, no, Blow by Blow. This is his fifth album. Came out in 1974. All right, and this is his 11th album, and it's called Crazy Legs. Came out in 1993. All right, so um, Jeff Beck is just extremely good guitarist. I mean, if you like guitar music, his best stuff is probably the period of time between when he was in a different group of bands. There was a couple of bands that he was in before he kind of went solo, um, and then he went into like an instrumental phase where he would, there'd be no singing on his album, or some songs would maybe have singing, but most of his would be instrumental. This is one of those type of albums, and this is his best time, his best work. This one and his first album before this one. Um, I'll show it here. But there was a group of albums um, when he went solo where it's mostly instrumental that at least I find his best stuff is, and this is one of them. It's called Blow to Blow, and this one is his ode to Gene Vincent, the Gene Vincent band, Gene Vincent. Um, but really, it's an ode to Cliff Gallup, who was Gene Vincent's guitarist at the time, one of his early guitarists, and he was the one that influenced Jeff Beck the most. At least that's what Jeff Beck said, or I read that Jeff Beck said that Cliff Gallup was his main influence in guitar playing. So this is basically an album dedicated to him, or Jeff Gallup and his Blue Caps. It was the name of the band that the guy was in, right? So it's not bad, but like I said, this was his best period in the 70s. That early stuff when he went solo, he had a group of two or three albums, including this one that was really, really good. And it's mostly instrumental guitar stuff, right? So, all right, so that's Jeff Beck. After that, we have one of Canada's greatest modern bands. All right. All right. We'll get the stickers off these suckers. And I have their first EP, which is just basically entitled Arcade Fire. Now, this came out in 2003, and this is the original one that they would hand out at their concerts and stuff before they were like super famous. The Arcade Fire. I mean, everybody in North America has heard even in Europe has heard of the Arcade Fire, one of Canada's greatest post-millennial bands, right? So this came out in 2003, and then when they put out Funeral, which was their first full-length album, people started listening to them, and um, Merge Records went back and got this and re-released it in 2005. Funeral came out in 2004, which is this album. All right, this is their first album. It came out in 2004, and it put them on the map. And then after Funeral came out, all right, they put out Neon Bible, which just cemented them as one of the greatest Canadian uh, bands of all time, indie bands of all time. All right. And this is their third album. This one came out in 2008. All right. So there was a 4 year period that everybody was listening to this. And then uh, Merge put out this EP again. All right. Um, and then people picked this up and listened to this. And in the 4 years in between, they listened to these two albums, uh, loving them. And then Arcade Fire put out Neon Bible, and people went ridiculous on that album. And then their third came out in 2010, so only 2 years later, and it is called The Suburbs. And people really shined on this as well. I don't know how many Junos the band won or Grammys, but they won a few. Let's put it that way. And if you haven't listened to Canadian music and you haven't listened to Arcade Fire, I think you're missing out because I would put this one up in my top 200. Maybe not top 100. A lot of people would put it in their top 100, but at least this one and this one and these two in the top 200 albums of all time. Right? They're not the greatest Canadian band of all time, but they're up there in the top like 10 Canadian bands ever. Up there with the Tragically Hip and all those. The Guess Who, those guys, right? Um, so that's Arcade Fire. All right. Next up, we have Two by the Arctic Monkeys. All right. And it's funny with the Arctic Monkeys, people just got on the bandwagon with the Arctic Monkeys. And then people just kind of got off and thought the Arcade Monkeys sucked or whatever. But during the time of this album, they were on top of the world. They were one of the greatest bands of all time. And I would put this in my top 100. All right. And it's called Whatever People Say I Am, I'm Not. Right. Is that what it is? It's very long. Yeah, whatever people say I am, that's what I'm not. Extremely long album cover, all right? And uh, the smoking on the front cover, I don't know. That's kind of passe as well. So maybe they were doing that as a point, right? They're banning smoking everywhere, right? So what do the Arctic Monkeys do? But the lead singer having a smoke, right? So anyway, I picked up on these guys with the song "I Bet You Look Good on the Dance Floor," or Um, that is an extremely rocking tune. Let's put it that way. It reminded me of a girl I knew at the time, right? So um, she didn't. I didn't mention to her why it reminded me of her, but anyways, it was it described her very perfectly, and that's what attracted me to that song. And then I picked up this whole album. This whole album is a banging album. It's like quite quick and quite bouncy and extremely good, right? So, um, and they had an EP with what was the name of that song? I really like that song. Oh, it's been years, right? Lament in the Departure Lounge. Lament in the Departure Lounge. Anyways, it's a song has a similar feeling to it as Leaving on a Jet Plane. Um, anyways, it's extremely good. And anyway, so this is their first album. All right. It came out in 2006, and I have other albums, but the only one that I found in this pack of 20 is Tranquility Base Hotel plus Casino. All right, and this came out. This is their sixth, and it came out in 2018. I have not listened to this one yet. All right, so um, but the Arcade Fire, extremely good British band, right? All right, so next up, that is another great Canadian indie rock band. All right, and they're called the Arkells. Arkells, all right. And I picked up their first four albums, all right. So this is Jackson Square, all right. Then you have Michigan Left, all right, from 2011. This one is 2008, all right. Then 3 years later, 2011, they put this one out, all right. Then in 2014, so another 3 years, They put out High Noon, all right, and then in 2016, 2 years later, they put out their fourth album, and it's called Morning Report. And you should listen to Arcade Fire, but I think a lot of people know Arcade Fire really well, all right, even non-Canadians. But I think the Arkells seem to be more kind of like a Canadian thing and less known internationally, at least not as much as, let's say, Arcade Fire. And they're one of the great indie rock post 2000, post millennial bands like that is from Canada. So if you want to explore some Canadian music, the Arkells should be a band that you should look into, right? Um, and that's all 20 of those albums. So hope you enjoyed it. So listen to the Arkells if you want. Listen to some Canadian music. Listen to some Arkells. All right. You want to listen to some Arcade Fire, another great Canadian band. All right. And you want to listen to some really great guitar rock, Jeff Beck, extremely good. All right. And so on and so forth. Aphex Twin, some great electronic and ambient, great Anthrax, some great thrash metal, and you go on from there. Belle Sebastian, some great, chamber pop, uh, saccharine type of stuff, right? So we have some really good albums there. A couple of them um, would make my top 100, top 200 albums of all time, and now you got if you hadn't heard of any of these bands, you now have an introduction. Go out and find them, or just go on Spotify, and the albums are on Spotify or iTunes or whatever, and give them a listen. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'm glad you joined me on this video. Thank you very much. And if you thought it was good, leave me a thumbs up. Think about subscribing. I would appreciate it. And we always do videos, or I always do videos. You know, weekly, 2 or 3 a week usually. And I hope you enjoy all of them. All right. And I'll talk to you in my next video. And you have a great day. And bye for now.